Okay, thanks everyone for being here. It's June 16th, it's 11 o'clock. This is our public safety financing meeting. Because this is technically a meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, we'll do public comment first. Anybody here for public comment? Everybody in the room, you're going to be welcome to participate fully. Everybody on Zoom? You on Zoom, press the raise hand button.
Nope, nothing.
Great. So on the agenda today for the Public Safety Finance meeting, we have Bill Ray here. We're going to do a review of the LAP survey that we did, as well as a shorter refresher on the fire authority funding survey we did last fall. And then I put together a very basic presentation of kind of our options and how we got here, and we'll use that to sort of facilitate the discussion about our next steps. Before we get started, why don't we just do introductions? I guess I'll start. I'm George Marlin. I'm a county commissioner from the Idaho Springs. Paul Rolfe, I'm the deputy county manager.
Hi, I'm Chuck Harmon, Mayor of City of Idaho Springs.
Andy Marsh, Idaho Springs City Administrator.
Rebecca Lloyd, Clear Creek County Commissioner from the east side.
Georgia Coved, Police Judge, Georgetown. Jeanette Peel, Empire Town Administrator.
Jenny Fulton, Communications Manager for the Sheriff's Office.
Eric Rubin, captain of the Patrol Division, Clear Creek County Sheriff's Office.
Jody Hartman Ball, Clear Creek County Commissioner, District 3.
Baby, fire chief.
The selectmen should jump in.
Thanks, Ben. Rich Barrows, Ward 3, Selectman from Georgetown.
Rich, welcome. We have some seats up here and you are welcome to join
Yeah, you
us.
can sit there, Rich.
Don't trip over a cord on your way.
There's a lot
We're not going
of
to
hazards.
or anything.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody was safe, as I've forgotten to warn them.
And I'm Beth Luther, Clear Creek County.
Megan Heiler, Public Information Officer, Clifford County.
Brian Botzhart, County Manager.
And Bill Ray, consultant, presenter.
Love it.
Okay, thank you for being here, Bill.
Yeah.
Let's start with a review of the latest public safety finance survey.
Great. Let me share my screen.
There you go.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm back again to present another survey result. So this time we did a survey on our public safety services, kind of following up on the one we did with Clear Creek Fire Authority. Jump backwards to these observations after I just set the scene a little bit on this survey. So this survey was countywide, unlike our fire authority survey, which was just in the fire authority service area. This survey went out in April and it went to 4,300 households. So it was a mailer that included information about the county's budget, information about the sheriff's office, EMS, CChat. And so we were really trying to educate folks to kind of let them know what this current situation was, what the services are provided, and what each key service provider, the challenges facing those key service providers. We built awareness of the survey and the mailer through sending out texts, newsletter articles, social media postings, working with the county team to get that out. And we had just under 400 responses when we closed the survey on June 3rd. I'll just go back on some observations so you can see these and think about these as we go through the survey results. Taxpayer confidence is below 50%. That can be a concern when you're doing a tax question. So I think that just means there's just some more work to be done with the community to talk about the budget challenges, the hard work the county is doing to address its budget challenges, and to always kind of highlight transparency and accountability to taxpayers. Open-ended comments. We got a lot of comments. Those were shared with the county team. A lot of concerns about the sheriff's office present in those comments. Taxes jumped to the number one concern, unlike the previous fire authority survey, which was more focused on housing and wildfire as top concerns. I believe, well, we know that this survey also went out when assessments went out kind of mid-survey. And we did see a little spike in people saying taxes was their main concern. People recognized how public safety tax would impact local sales tax and grocery purchases. So that people are keen to that. Residents in the Evergreen area were in favor, while Georgetown and Idaho Springs residents lean toward opposition. Younger and older voters were generally more supportive of the sales tax. Just a reminder, if you were to do that in 2025, older voters would be significant proportion of the electorate, right? Well over 50%. Respondents were most supportive of EMS components. And then even some respondents to the survey asked, well, where does fire fit into this? You know, it's not there. Where is that? So just something to keep in mind. Okay, real quick demographics. So remember, we had about 400 surveys. And I always am asked, well, was that enough surveys? Are you happy with that? What I always like is balance. I like balance in a survey, and we had great balance in this one. So age groups, we only asked a few demographic questions, but if you look in this age group here, 2025 LV, that means likely voters, people who are most likely based on their voter history to vote. And you can see we were fairly close. I mean, we're a little under, about 10 points under on 65 and older folks answering the survey. But in a lot of other categories, we were really close. So we just had a good balance. We have got a lot of viewpoints in this survey. Similarly, zip code, you can see here that we were fairly balanced and we have a lot of good viewpoints from our different zip codes, our different regions of the county. Same with gender. And then just so you know, about 40, boy, that print is small. Let's say almost 50% said they've lived here in Clear Creek County 21 years or longer. And just so you know, when you look at the voter file and 2025 likely voters, more than 50% of them have lived here for 15 years or longer. So we're kind of like capturing, I think, a good mix of people in this survey. Okay, so we started the survey asking folks what's the top issue that they facing the county or the town they live in. And you can see here, taxes was the number one issue. That was a distant fourth, the fire survey a few months before. But like I said, with the property tax notices going out, we probably put that a little bit front and center in people. But then it goes to wildfire risk, cost and availability of housing. So then those next two categories kind of mirror the most recent previous survey. And you can see here by zip code that kind of what those key issues are. So taxes was pretty consistent. Evergreen, that definitely spiked there. Housing, more bigger number in Georgetown. But, you know, you can see that when you go back and review these slides. And then top issues by age range, tax issue very acute in 45 to 54s, 55 to 64-year-olds. For our 65 and olders, who will be more than half of the electorate, they were more balanced around wildfire risk and taxes. Confidence in Clear Creek County. So we always want to have a measure. How confident would you say the county is in handling your taxpayer dollars wisely? So you can see here about 40% confident. I like to always have that number over 50%. One thing I really want to key in on is that purple number, not confident at all. And that's a number, you really definitely want to change, get that number smaller, get more people into the confident area. But that's a number that, just a lot of people start out not confident, which kind of colors their thoughts around a potential tax question. Okay, so we asked folks to give us on a scale of 1 to 5, an approval rating for the sheriff's office on the left-hand side, average rating 3.41. The most common response was a 4. And then on the right-hand side is EMS at an average rating of 4.15. 30%, the biggest category in the numbers was 5, but they have a pretty high unsure, which probably means you don't know much about it until you need it. Okay, then we went into a series of questions about funding priorities. We're just kind of trying to see if there was a question put on the ballot, if we were going to kind of talk to residents more about this, what would they prioritize? So here on the sheriff's office, allowing the sheriff's office to hire additional deputies to improve patrol coverage, that got an average rating of 3.15. Addressing capital needs, 2.87. And then improving salaries and benefits to recruit and retain, 3.29. So that was the highest there. For EMS and CChat, they're at the top. Staffing and equipping a third ambulance, maintain prompt response times, 3.58. Planning for current ambulance needs by adding and retaining trained staff, 3.67. That probably goes to people's feelings. We got to have a great staff there when I need that ambulance. Providing funds to maintain and repair, 3.67. And then providing sustainable funds for CChat, 3.08. So, nothing jumps up to the 4s, but still the EMS definitely had the highest ratings there for those components. All right, so then in the survey, we asked folks how they would feel about a public safety sales tax. And we did use something pretty close to ballot language because I think it's really important for folks to see that shall taxes be increased language because that's what they're going to see on their ballot. And we don't want the first time they see that to be when they get their ballot. So here you can see 49% yes, 46% no. But what really my eyes, and I think your eyes should key in on, is that light blue at 24%, definitely yes, to the 32% definitely no in the purple. Those are the folks who make up their mind right away. They get their ballot. They already know how they're voting. And you don't really want to be upside down on that number if you're trying to get a question approved by your voters. So that I would tell you, even though the numbers, 49 to 46 seem not terrible, it's those intensity measures that kind of cause me pause. You can see here by zip code. So in Evergreen, it's well over 60% support. But on the flip side, in Georgetown, Idaho Springs, it's the flip there.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
80436 unincorporated, Evergreen's also unincorporated. So what's the distinction there?
I could have put Evergreens. Oh, you mean 80439 is also unincorporated?
Yes.
Yeah, I can easily update this. I just was trying to highlight the Evergreens.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that since that's my district. But so the 80436, is that like DLD? Okay. All right. Thank you.
And you can see here by age range, 45 to 54-year-olds.
Clarify on that. So Evergreen is unincorporated for 80439. And then
It's basically DLD.
So there's a lot of unincorporated
Bakerville.
that's not in 80436.
That's a lot, most of that, the lion's share is in 80452. St. Mary's, I think Blue Valley is 80452.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I
so
wonder,
just
instead of
using zip codes
unincorporated, we
is
should
tough.
say DLD.
Yes, I think that's just what we need to clarify because there are unincorporated.
Correct.
That is correct. So
Yeah.
your Idaho Springs, actually, the commissioner and I talked about this like a week or so ago, has probably kind of more like 50-50
Mhm.
municipal to unincorporated, right? So we asked what's your zip code. We did not ask what your town or your municipality or your community name is. We asked your zip code. So yes, I'm making kind of a gross assumption here that by putting Idaho Springs under that zip code, because I know it's more than just municipal folks.
Did you get any responses from like Bakerville or?
Like I said, we asked zip code. So what zip code's Bakerville?
476.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
There's probably only maybe 3 mail recipients.
So we didn't ask folks, like I said, we asked what their zip code was, not the name of their town.
Okay.
And Bill, I remember when I asked you that, your answer was because people aren't always sure whether they live inside or outside the municipality. And so if you ask that question, you end up maybe not getting accurate results.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. I was just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, and a good example of that is people who say they live in Evergreen.
Right.
That's not incorporated, right? There is
Right.
a town of Evergreen.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, so that's where it gets confusing.
Right. And then the border of Idaho Springs and Floyd Hill, it's like, and the zip code. I mean, you may still think you're on Floyd, or you are on Floyd Hill, but you might be in Idaho Springs versus unincorporated Evergreen.
Yeah. And we asked zip code also because that's the easiest thing for me to break out as far as proportion of voters, stuff like that, right? Because if I look up Idaho Springs in the voter file, I do get everyone unless I dig deeper and then it says Idaho Springs in, Idaho Springs out. But people don't know, or
Yeah.
some do, some don't,
Right.
but they know their zip code.
Mhm.
Hopefully. I don't know. Know their phone number maybe. Well,
Well, yeah, no, that can be all over too.
yeah. The sales tax by age range, you can see here that group at 45 to 54-year-old, they were, especially not enamored with that idea. But, not strong support across the board, nothing really popping over 60% in an age group. 65 or olders who would make up a more than 50% of the voter turnout in 25, barely hit 50% support. So I'll say, I've been doing this 20 years and this would be a tough measure to pass on this ballot. We did ask a property tax alternative. We don't have, basically another option is to do 15 mills to fund these services. And you can see folks overwhelmingly said no thanks on the property tax for this as an alternative. So I think the numbers speak for themselves. I'm not sure if we have to dig deep there with that unless you want to. Okay. We asked folks why, if they were no or unsure, why they were. And you can see here 30% said taxes are already too high. Another 28% did other. And those went into a report that went to the team here that's available to read through. A lot of those comments still focused around tax concerns. Concerns with county government handling of tax dollars. The sheriff's office came up in those. So there were, a lot of different comments. Some people really took their time to share more comments in there. I wonder if they just didn't realize we were going to have an opportunity at the end of the survey for comments as well. You can see here the reasons no unsure by zip code. Taxes already too high, very prevalent in that Georgetown and Idaho Springs area zip codes. Whereas up in Evergreen was a little more a little more all over the board, different reasons. By age, I was pretty surprised. Actually, the younger folks were much more taxes are already too high. Because you just see that being more in older groups. But remember, 18 to 34-year-olds were also a pretty small portion of the respondents to this survey, and they were pretty close to their proportion for voter turnout. All right. So we asked folks on a scale of 1 to 5 about the potential of Clear Creek County having to reduce sheriff's office services, which would likely increase response times for law enforcement and potentially compromise safety of the community. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very concerned, how concerning is that to you? We wanted to kind of make sure people understand there could be a trade-off here in the future. That was kind of where these two questions were trying to kind of get folks to respond to that. And that had an average rating of 3.2. Similarly, for the EMS, that it could reduce levels of service, increase response times, which could compromise health and wellness. That got a 3.6 concern rating. So folks are concerned. They recognize that this isn't as simple as just cutting budgets, that there would be an impact.
Another quick question, sorry. It sounds like we need to do a better job of saying our neighbors pay a lot more in public safety tax than we do. And that's my understanding of Jeffco and Summit that borders us. Would that help or hinder or?
I've never really found that comparing yourself to your neighbor really works that well in these. I think no one wants to bring their tax level up because their neighbor's tax level is higher.
Right, there's a reason why they live here.
Right.
Yeah.
Or I think the best way to do it is to communicate what service levels we need as a community to be safe on the public safety side, the fire side, response times for EMS, and try and explain to them what funding levels are needed to maintain or improve those service levels and decide. And hopefully folks will, make that value judgment about service levels versus, but I've never found that kind of, because our neighbor's higher, we should be higher.
Okay.
I don't see that. And I
So
think we asked something.
And is our neighbor has better service than we do because they pay more?
Right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and here's the other thing. You live here. These are your constituents, your community. You know best, better than me, how in the end to communicate with your community members. So I also leave a bit of that judgment up to you all as elected officials and stuff like that. But I've noticed this, it's not been successful in other places I've worked.
Thank you.
All right, so we asked again if folks would be more or less likely to support the sales tax, knowing that visitors would fund about 40% of this tax. And you can see here that about 57% of folks said they'd be more likely, but also about 31% says it doesn't make much difference to them. I did pull out a similar question here we asked in the fire service survey just for comparison. We didn't give an exact percentage on that one in the survey, but that one was more like 70%. Every time though we mention visitors and tourists, we get the other questions around, well, why isn't the state paying for this? Why do we have to pay for this? So we do open up kind of another can of worms, I think, sometimes when we bring this up. So we do have to be careful. And I think that's something you and I have talked about, Commissioner, because you're hearing some of that from the community. You can see here, I broke this out by zip code and age range here just for you to look at as you're reviewing these results in the future. I'm just going to keep moving through these because we do need to get to another one. And then, of course, we always ask an open-ended question at the end. I believe we got about 200 comments from folks. So that goes into a report that's available to read. I always pull some out that I think are kind of highlight. This bar across the top is a content analyst, kind of measures the comments and puts from a mad face to a happy face on it. Just so you know, in most places, the red is over 50%. So don't overthink it, because most of the time it's folks who have something kind of, angry to say that take time to write a response into these surveys. Most of the time, kind of folks who are like, I love it, I support your idea. They don't take time to write comments, but a lot of them center around, there were a lot of around the sheriff's office, as I said earlier, but of course, many about taxes are already too high. You keep raising taxes, it's going to be even harder to live here. So I'll let you, unless you want me to read through them, let you all read these kind of on your own time. You have copies here, and then maybe flip to the fire survey.
Before we do, any comments, observations about this survey?
I have a quick question just on the sampling. It looked like 4,300 ballots, or not ballots, questionnaires were.
Mailers,
And then 300 and some odd responded?
just under 400.
Okay, so do we have any way of knowing how representational
Yeah,
those people are?
yeah, I already did that at the beginning, and I'll flip back to
I'm
that.
sorry.
So you can see here, we asked three main demographic questions. And this is, if you have your packet, it's like page 4.
Right.
You can see here, so 18 to 34-year-olds compared to likely voters. We got that'll be about 6.9% of likely voters.
Out of the 4,300.
Out of your voters in your county, the folks who are likely to vote in 2025, because voters are incredibly habitual. So we go into the voter file and we look at their likelihood to vote, and we come up with these kind of metrics around this. I'm predicting that about 7% of your likely voters in 2025, if you were to put a question on the ballot, will be 18 to 34 years. And in this survey, 7.7% of the responses were from 18 to 34.
Okay, so that's how you.
Yeah.
Gotcha, thank you.
So in 35 to 44-year-olds, about 12%. Well, that's about 15%. So that gives you a sense of, did we have a good balance or not?
Thank you.
I think we did have a good balance there. Same with zip code. So that would be page 5. Read that as well.
Okay.
Pretty good balance there. Little light on that 80439 zip code, but we had a little extra turnout in 80452 and 80444 in the survey. But still, I'd say fairly balanced.
Thank you.
I have a question. Maybe the county commissioners have a better idea of this, but the survey didn't ask any questions about what the expectation from the community is on law enforcement. Are they more apt to a proactive policing style or more of a reactive policing style?
I think it differs across our county. In Evergreen, we'd like, more traffic enforcement. We don't have a lot of other crime. We like having a patrol car drive around the neighborhoods just to put people on notice that you guys are there. But in other parts of the county, they've had bad interactions with, historically with the sheriff's office. And so they want probably less policing. But from my perspective, on my end, we welcome you.
A thought on that, just for edification of everybody here. Sheriff Harris was brought here as a change agent.
Absolutely.
Um,
And we need to get the word out.
Absolutely. You know, he came here probably about a year and a half ago. And I think what sticks in people's memories is an incident from 3 years ago.
Right.
And Sheriff Harris has done tremendous work and effort in professionalizing this agency. He has hired some top-notch professional people from larger agencies with a lot of experience. For instance, Jenny here comes from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, top-notch PIO. And her communications have been outstanding. Captain Lucas just completed a 10-week course through Northwestern University Center for Police Staff and Command. These are the sorts of efforts that the sheriff is putting into to ensure that we are becoming the best we can be. We're never going to be perfect, but he is absolutely striving for excellence. So my point is, he's made great progress. And I would just say this is not the time to back away from that. You know, we have our critics. But at the same time, if the critics really supportive of us improving, then sometimes there's a cost associated with that. It's not always that way, but it's something to think about.
Right. Well, and from my end of the county, we want you to be able to afford to buy more patrol cars to, get out and about in the community.
Just a quick bit of commentary from me. I think if we ran a survey on the sheriff's office 3 years ago, to your point, Captain Rubin, I don't think it would look this good. And I think the sheriff's office has done a lot to rebuild its brand. It's obvious with all of us, there's always work to do building our brand and got a ways to go.
We're never done.
Yeah.
We are simply never done. You can never stand on your laurels and say, well, we've accomplished that, we're through. You always have to try to improve and strive for excellence. I did notice when I was looking at some of these statistics and these numbers, we're in many cases well above 50% of each of these entities, if I'm interpreting this correctly. It's not as if it's a 2.5 reading on every one of these things. Actually, it's above that. So I think it's sometimes comes down to interpretation. So we want to get better. We are thoroughly committed to being the best we can be. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, should we move to the next one?
Yeah, sure.
This is
Share my screen again. Okay, so switching over to the survey we did with the fire authority last year. I did shorten this deck down a bit to be more a summary, but I can still pull up the results if we want to. So this one was done to 3,500 households because we pulled out the households that were not in the service area. And once again, we got a mailer out with the survey. We had press release, text invites, social media postings, all those same ways to kind of raise awareness. And when we closed that survey on December 10th, we had 344 responses to that one. I did cut out the demographic slides from this one as a way to trim down the size, but we had a really good balance in that survey as well. We had a real good mix of our zip codes and our age groups in that one, and I'm happy to pull those up separately. You can see here what were the top issues then: wildfire risk, cost of housing, traffic and congestion. You can see taxes were far lower on the scale there back on this survey. Approval rating. So very similar to the way we asked it for the sheriff's office and EMS. We had 4.44 average rating for Clear Creek Fire Authority, and with almost 50% giving it a 5. So really great there. How confident are you in the fire authority using your tax dollars wisely? Nearly 60% were confident, either very or somewhat confident, with another large group at 30% just being unsure. So, like I pointed out here, an opportunity to educate community members about the fire authority. Kind of one of the big parts of the piece we put out, the education piece we put out, and getting feedback in the survey is this need to kind of transition or have more paid firefighters, because we're losing, or we don't have as many of the volunteers to provide staffing. And you can see folks, 46% of folks gave that a high priority, that the fire authority should be working on those plans to increase paid firefighters. So we did not ask an actual ballot question in this one because we had several different options. And if folks saw 3 different ballot questions, it would probably overwhelm them a bit. So we worked hard to come up with kind of 3 models for folks to look at for possible funding measures. And we asked folks to rank them on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not supportive at all to 5 being very supportive. And it is kind of tricky because no one really wants to raise their taxes. So we're just trying to get a sense of what folks would be comfortable with. So here are the 3 options. The first one was a 1.45% sales tax on purchases within the county and the 4 municipalities. And that got an average rating of 3.34. Option 2 was a mill levy of just under 15 mills. And that was not very well liked at 2.52. And then the option 3 was a hybrid of a sales tax and a mill levy. And that one just almost, kind of middling response there at 3.16. Like I said, there was not ballot language, so no one saw shall taxes be increased. I do think as you move forward with a proposal, that's an important thing to remember, that, we do need to socialize with our community what that would look like. Just real quick, the funding options by zip code and age range. Option 1, pretty consistent across the different zip codes. With age range, the 35 to 44-year-olds liked it the most, and then the support kind of declined as older folks responded to the survey. Funding option 2, property tax, not very popular across the board there.
And that was even last year before the increase?
Yeah, that was in like November.
Okay, thank you.
So. And then funding option 3, which was the hybrid, you can see a little more support for it, obviously, across the zip codes, no spikes, and also really across the age, with, just property tax being less popular among older voters. When we did ask folks about why they were nowhere unsure about any of these, no surprise, taxes are already too high in Clear Creek County. The orange, which was other, if my memory serves right, was still just kind of a smattering of all of the above, all of these choices, to taxes, general concerns around tax.
And what was the I-70 issue on there?
That might have been, I'm sorry. There was a follow-on slide that showed some of the other comments, and I'm glad you brought that up. There were a lot of people talking about I-70. Why are we paying for I-70? Why do we have to pay for a fire truck to go out on I-70? Shouldn't that be the state? So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. And that was consistent in this survey, is kind of concerns about why are we paying for, taking care of people on I-70. And we tried to explain that in the mailer, but you can only do so much to educate folks on that.
Do you see?
What was your explanation? Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you see more of that in this community than in others that you survey?
Yeah, I do a lot of work for Eagle River Fire in Eagle County and Greater Eagle Fire. And we just recently passed a sales tax for Eagle River. Even though their trucks are on I-70 between Avon and Edwards all the time, it rarely came up. Rarely came up. I'm just trying to think of other I-70 mountain communities.
Right, yeah, we're really concentrated here.
I've never done a fire or public safety in Summit County, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But as far as Eagle, rarely comes up, and those Eagle fire trucks are on the highway all the time. So, yeah. How did we explain it, you asked?
Yeah.
I'd have to refresh my memory, but we have a website that's still up that had the narrative, and we can get that to you real easy. And you can.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So we asked 3 different questions around sales tax, around these things to see how folks responded. Would you be more or less likely to support a sales tax dedicated to fire service, knowing that visitors and tourists? And you can see here, we didn't have an exact percentage in this question, but 70% of respondents said they'd be more likely to support. But like I said, when you bring that up, you kind of open up another can of worms. Would you be more likely to support this, less likely to support this, knowing that it could push up the sales tax rates in our municipalities over 10%? Because I think I do think you need to kind of socialize that counterbalance there. And you can see people reacted, 52% said less likely to support there. Would you be more or less likely to support a combined sales and property tax since it balances how the fire authority is funded? So kind of a blend of funding. And almost, 45% said they'd be more likely to support. So there's some education there possible with the community around how property tax could help provide some funding balance there. I think that still that would need community outreach and engagement, I think, on the property tax side.
And based on your experience
Mhm.
running ballot measures, my understanding is that that combination would actually have to be in 2 separate decisions by taxpayers. So they're reading their ballot and it's like increase mills by this and then increase sales tax. So splitting that up, would that make it less likely to be approved?
It'd be harder for sure, because you got to get folks to vote yes on 2 things.
Right.
And that's always harder than one thing.
So I think it's a little deceptive the way the question was asked. People not realizing that.
Yeah.
And so they may split the difference or whatever.
I'm not sure it's deceptive. Maybe it just.
Oh, well, no, as a voter who is not sophisticated, they would read that and go, oh, okay, they're going to combine it. And then they get their ballot and they have to say yes twice.
Yeah. Yeah, and that might be the case, but if you're going to do 2 different kinds of taxes, it's going to have to be 2 different.
Yeah, because that was my initial support. I thought, well, that makes the most sense to me. But if people are going to get confused about it or concerned about it.
Yeah, that's why there would need to be community outreach, engagement, a potential campaign to support it if that was going to be a pathway. Yeah. I think that was the last slide I pulled out on that. I can pull more if needed.
Pretty good on time. Love for us to have an hour to sort of discuss what this all means put together, but observations, thoughts, what we remember from the conversation last time. Georgia, I know this is your first time seeing it. Rich, go ahead.
I mean, the thing that I have to keep in mind that these are snapshots
Mhm.
and that of how people are feeling that at the time they fill these surveys out. I'm thinking like, how close was the survey to the Marshall fire on the fire authority? And where that might be feeling a little more intense about that at that time. I noticed it was still very high even in this one, as far as it was number 2 as far as what people are feeling. And then ballot proposal, if that was laid out with the mill levies and all that within the fire authority deal, this time around, of what, a month or two after those tax bills went out. I think that really, that affects that snapshot and the possibility, and who knows what's gonna happen between now and November. That's the other piece.
For sure.
And then the other thing is that there was a question in this latest survey about the fire authority and how it wasn't included so much in this public safety survey. I'm wondering if that would, some of the positive things that people said and how they felt about it in the first fire survey, if that would have maybe improved some of the outcomes, if folks knew that a certain percentage of that was going to help support fire services also.
That could have.
That's just some things that looking at that I thought about.
I think your first point, I often say that during these presentations, that surveys do really capture the way people feel at that time they took the survey. And I never want someone to use the survey as like their only decision point. It should not be the tail that wags the dog. It should be one of many information points that you all use, whether it's talking to constituents, residents, business owners, presenting to different groups, getting feedback from the community. It's just part of sausage making of this whole thing, right? You take a lot of feedback, input, information, and proposals, and you kind of try and put it all together into a decision.
George, I just wanted to share, I was completely unprepared for the difference between the sales tax and the property tax. I mean, it was just overwhelming, the difference when you asked that question. And the second thing was, would not wish worry on anyone. But the brutal truth is, it was a good thing that wildfire mitigation is consistently like number one or number two, based on whatever survey you're looking at, because without real serious concern about that danger, we have no hope of funding an answer. So I would say in that regard, that's great news.
It is good to see when concerns match reality. That's the case in those wildfire responses. Other comments? Judy?
I just wanted to say something that I wonder if some of our problem too is our municipalities have such a high tax. When you look at Summit County, you're looking at like 2% for Breck and Idaho.
Oh, their sales tax is more than 2%.
With the state, the county and the municipalities. So when the municipalities are like 2 something. And Idaho Springs 5, Georgetown is 4.5. So we're also up against that too. The state is 2.9. Summit Counties is 2%. So when you combine all these up, I do think that is part of our issue. And people see that 10.5, that's what they're looking at.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, my concern on the sales tax front, if I beat this horse to death, is that residents don't really understand that they will more likely pay more in a sales tax than they will on property tax. And two, it'll be the highest, if you do 2%, Idaho Springs will be the highest sales tax in the country. That's the front page of the Wall Street, right? Like, someone passes 10 mils, no one cares, right? If you're number one, all of a sudden we have a reputation that's going to go wide, that we're paying. Like, if you come and visit Clear Creek County, you're paying the highest sale potentially. I haven't found one higher. The highest I've found is Gorda, Arkansas, which is 11.5, right? So we'll be 12 to 2%, right? So I do think it's crazy. And I want to put that in the good discussion that we had at the mayors and commissioners meeting last week, that we're doing well on sales tax right now. People view Clear Creek County as affordable. So Bragg and all these other places are getting crushed. We're overperforming. And if we lose that, we're losing a competitive advantage. And you can lose that by being on the front of the Wall Street Journal saying, hey, look at this funny little place in Colorado that now has a 12% sales tax, right? So.
Well, and for locals too, they don't understand that's their Amazon. That's when they buy a car. That's any purchase.
Yeah. So I just want to put that out there.
And of course, that article will never say, we're a little tiny county who's trying to subsidize the state government of all the EMS and the fire and
Exactly.
It'll just be the number.
sheriff. Yep.
There's a lot of good reasons why it's that way.
I said journalist.
Is still being number one is tough.
Okay.
Right?
That's, it seems like people are wanting to jump in, right? Just discussing the options. After our last meeting, I in writing kind of what our options are and what we've been through. Megan or Beth, I'm not sure if you put that up, but thank you. I just want to start by saying that this is an opportunity to appreciate your county staff and the professionals in the room. This does not look like how presentations are supposed to look like, right? Tax-based, or text-based. My appreciation for my team grew as I put this together. So if we could go to the first slide. These are really, we'll put it up. This is about our shared goal. I'm curious, do people agree that this is our shared goal? What's missing? What's wrong?
George, I spent some time with this before the meeting today. And I thought it was spot on. I will tell you, there isn't anything that I saw that I.
It's nice that you captured everything we've been kind of talking about. So we have something in front of us to refer to. So thank you.
Yeah. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to move to the next slide. This is our shared goal, right? We have all of these services matter. So then this is a breakdown of our long-term needs. Couple of things, good and bare minimum. Bare minimum is new. This on the fire authority side. The Clear Creek Fire Authority Board came together and said, what can we do to pare this down even further to like, what is the absolute bare minimum for the fire authority? So you can see what came out of there. And then Clear Creek EMS is not here. So I'm just very quickly, what you didn't see when we were presenting on the county general fund challenges is that the EMS fund also has a deficit. It's listed there. We did talk about the need for a third ambulance. The $513,000 annual deficit is also there. And so I'm going to stop talking and just hear questions about this, observations about what this information means.
Just a quick clarification, just to do apples to apples. Do you have annual deficits for fire authority and sheriff, or am I not seeing it?
The long range need for the general fund is $4.8 million. And so that's a combination of deficit and things we need that we're not funding.
Well, I just like the annual deficit for EMS. That's front and center. That's clear.
Yes.
And do we have a similar one for the other two, or?
First line of the good.
First line.
Current operating budget deficit.
Thank you.
And the sheriff, because it's not a one service fund, the general fund services a lot of things. The sheriff's office has a proportional deficit, which is third line, right? The 1.5, right? Of the
Okay.
long-term deficit. Now, you could give them, you could also take just a portion of our year-over-year deficit too. But since the general fund is fluid, it's a little bit harder to define that number. Whereas the EMS and fire authority are operating on their own funds, right? So they can just say
Okay.
this is
Thank you.
our deficit.
Thank
right?
you.
Yeah, you could put a number to it, but it's a little less, it's harder because it's more fluid, right? Their sheriff's percentage of our general fund deficit would change based on their budget compared to everyone else's budget. Whereas the fire authority EMS are on solo operation funds.
Thank you.
And to explain a little bit further, on the fire authority board, what we did was we said there's a service need, we're going to invest in it now. And so you're going to see a big deficit number, right? When you look at the general fund, we've taken a different approach, right? We've said we're going to hold back. And that means there's a whole lot of need that's not in our $1.3 million deficit this year. But it's need that exists, right? It's still, if we don't fill that $4.8 million number, we're gonna see service reductions. So that's why we're using that number there. Or that's another piece of it. So I know this is fiendishly complex here and so other questions? Other thoughts, observations, what this means? Okay. Trying to break down kind of the immediacy of the need. Stick to my commitment not to read this to you. I want to point out with EMS, their fund balance right now is $200,000. So the EMS fund is insolvent beginning next year. The county general fund can cover the EMS fund and did so for a long time before the sales tax measure passed. So that doesn't mean that you'll see service reductions next year in EMS. I don't think. I can speak for the board. We haven't done our budget yet, but I presume we would be making sure that paramedics are there. It's a safe thing to say. Thoughts on that? Kelly?
I would say that if we don't have a successful ballot this year, the discussion about being solvent in 3 years or 2 years has to take center stage with fire authority, for sure, because what's left, we have another chance at the ballot in 26. 50-50 chance you get it. If you don't, then you have to, at the end of the year, there will be 1.3 million there. And for deficit spending, even without spending money on capital, that you don't have money there to even. You won't be able, everything will have to go back to the municipalities. And it'll look a lot different than it did years ago. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind, that we have to have a successful ballot question this year. We have to make decisions next year.
I think that dynamic exists for all these funds. I think you said it well. I think that dynamic exists for all of these funds. You saw the Board of County Commissioners. We did layoffs last year. We're 4 years out from being insolvent, but you don't wait until you have nothing in your fund, right? And so it's a point that's well made. That 2028 year would look a lot like what this year looks like for EMS, where you're ending the year with a couple $100,000 in your fund. Any thoughts on this one? Georgia?
No, I'm just thinking, so you were saying that for EMS, the county can fund that deficit and has been funding the deficit. Is that right?
The county did for a while until, was it 2017 that the sales tax measure was passed? Something like 2016. And then it became able to fund itself. And needs have grown again. Costs have outpaced sales tax growth again. And we can get into, I think there's a slide here that talks a little bit about chat, but I know there are questions about chat. Oh, that was in the long-term need slide, but CChat, the co-responder program, was called for by our district attorney in 20. Is funded through EMS. A lot of them are funded through Sheriff's Office. Its $520,000 a year budget is almost completely grant funded. And we don't know how long that will keep up.
May I add to that?
Yeah.
Our general fund can cover the difference for the EMS, but we're already operating at a deficit in our general fund.
Correct.
So that will just make the deficit in our general fund greater
Okay.
in order to make EMS whole.
And so how long can that keep happening?
4 years or less.
There you go. Okay. Oh, I got you.
So the sheriff could just say general.
To the general fund.
County general
Yeah.
fund. It's got
Thank you.
years left.
Because we're focusing on public safety and we've made the decision to sort of, as we talk about sustainability of funding, promise to sustain public safety services first. We're talking about that.
And I like your statement at the bottom. We have to keep hitting that when we talk to our constituents, because that's the reality. It's not that, oh, we're gonna lose niceties. It's services, safety services.
Text gets a little bit smaller here. These are the legally available funding options. I would point out to you, there's one that we've never discussed, which is the countywide mill levy. That really can fund the sheriff's office only,
Why is that?
because county general funds. Well, first off, there's a service district mismatch, right?
How so?
Clear Creek Fire Authority and Clear Creek EMS don't cover the whole county.
Oh, right, I know that. So
Just for clarification though, a countywide mill levy can fund anything in our general fund.
Correct.
I think that's
Correct.
maybe
Yeah.
going there, right? It's not,
Oh, that's what you're asking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could run a mill levy for childcare, for housing, for.
Okay. But for the purposes of public safety funding, it can only fund the sheriff. Got it.
It's an example of me trying to simplify the cost of, 100% accurate. I also want to point out lodging tax. On May 15th of this year, the governor signed a bill that could let us ask for a lodging tax to fund public safety. I would point out to you all that it also it's traditionally been used to fund tourism marketing efforts, recreation management efforts, or tourism management efforts is a better way to say that. Currently, the lodging taxes that are collected around the county also fund housing and child. Other thoughts on this?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's not specific legal, it's more policy, but a lodging tax, which of course would affect visitors the most, would also of course affect businesses. So I'm curious, since it would be the people around this table, in particular the electeds, that would be thinking about business owners that are constituents in their cities, is a lodging tax increase something that they would be supporting? Because that could be up to another 4%, so 4 or 5. No, 4%, because there's goes from 2 to now the max would be 6. I'm just throwing that out there as a revenue source.
Like in Georgetown, that was what, 2 years ago? So that's pretty recently for voters to vote for that. To fund those things. And I think the county had something on that same ballot about how they were going to use lodging taxes, fund tourism, housing, and some of those other issues that we talked about. Again, proximity to when last voted for that may be an issue with putting it on the ballot again for at least.
And just a note on the lodging tax, it's definitely an option. Maybe it's later in the slide, but we have a 7-figure problem. That's not 7 figures of the revenue.
Right. So,
Right?
Yeah.
It's
a
just,
lot of money.
it's there, but it's not one that is at the order of magnitude that we would need unless we got optimal in the county.
Okay.
And to Colton's point, I would say that council probably would unanimously support that increase simply because I think everybody on council realizes that is 100% paid for by visitors and not one local. But just to put a fine point on Colton's issue with not raising a lot of money, we only have 15 short-term rentals in the city, so it wouldn't generate a significant
That's
increase.
the problem. It's the volume.
The other thing with Idaho Springs specifically, and please correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, a lot of your motels are used for housing.
You are exactly right. Yeah.
So something else to consider.
I think we have 35 short-term rentals and not all those are filled. It's probably
Right.
closer to 25
Hmm.
Right.
licensed right now.
So it's, I mean, I view the lodging tax conversation as a down the road conversation. There are a lot of complexities about who's asking if they're going to do with it, whether you're trying to do it in a way that the state has to collect for you or you have to collect for yourself. Lots of complexity there. I personally, mayors, I think this is something that we should be throwing on mayors and commissioners' agendas at some point over the next 12 months to
Agreed.
work through the complexity of that.
George, can you review just for those of us that are new, how the lodging tax works in unincorporated versus Georgetown and Idaho Springs?
If, are you talking about, I think I know where you're going. Counties can collect lodging tax within the municipality when the municipality is not collecting the lodging tax. If a municipality collects a lodging tax, then the county cannot. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So like we would want to work through, if we wanted to do this in a way that was sustainable and known, we would want, I think, to have the municipalities all saying, and the county all being on the same page about here's what we want to use lodging tax for and who's getting on the ballot and what's being done with it. And we can all go our own way, or we could decide to do it together. And I think that's a conversation. It's not overdue. It's a conversation that's on the horizon because now we can go from 2 to 6%.
Okay, but to Jody's point, if we just imposed it on unincorporated, then the Evergreen, St. Mary's, DLD, short-term rentals could go up, but it wouldn't adversely affect the municipalities.
We can't just assess it on unincorporated. The lodging tax applies countywide.
Thank you.
Unless a municipality such as Georgetown has adopted their own lodging tax equivalent type of assessment.
Okay, but I've assumed that you do have lodging tax.
We do. It's the same, yeah.
At least Georgetown, all the others do not collect lodging tax
So
for themselves.
this is an example of me deciding to put it on here in full disclosure at risk of complicating the conversation.
Which I'm duly working on.
No, it's,
Okay, sorry.
I mean, it's like, we should know at least that why I don't think there's a recommendation that we have a lodging tax this year.
Okay.
I do want to point out here, I was hoping someone would take the bait, but I'm just going to point it out. Under the
This is the wrong date.
ESG, that's okay. That's okay. Under the ESGID mill levy and municipal contributions, right now, I think most of the municipalities are paying for fire out of their general funds. All of them, except for Silver Plume, which has a dedicated mill levy. You all can use whatever means you would like to can pay your contribution. That includes property tax, sales tax. I would love to talk to you about a little thing called the occupational tax that is much more flexible. Idaho Springs, for example, I believe you could tax the rafting industry this year. Not saying you want to this year, but and then this is new. I actually had assumed the answer to this question was no, but the ESGID that has tax proposal authority over the unincorporated portion, the fire authority district, can fund all of these public safety services. It's an emergency services general improvement district. So it can fund all three of these categories we're talking about. Other thoughts on or questions about what are, and I think we all understand what the countywide public safety sales tax means. We've already discussed a complication there, which is that Evergreen Fire sales taxpayers in Evergreen in a campaign, when people really start thinking about this, will realize that if they're being asked to fund fire protection in someone else's district, that's a harder ask.
But we don't. It's a pass through back to Evergreen, right?
We could set it up like that. I think that complicates things for Evergreen Fire Protection District because that's a small portion of their district, right? The Evergreen Fire Protection is like a lot of Jeffco. And so you'd be raising a tax rate on just a portion of their district, and I don't think they would like that. So I think the option when we do, and I think we do eventually need to talk about a countywide public safety sales tax. When we start thinking about that option, I think what we need to do is talk about enhancing sheriff's office services in the Evergreen area. Right, your taxes are going to go up. It's not going up so that we can fund the paramedic somewhere else. It's so that we can do better with the sheriff's office over here.
Mhm.
I think that's, but I don't think that's the tax measure that's not what's being recommended here. So can we go to the, well, let me pause. Other thoughts? Next slide. These are the options we've really been discussing, right? We've been discussing an ESD mill increase to fund fire and a public safety sales tax to fund fire, sheriff, and EMS. Well, I continue to believe we need both. It's a matter of timing. Next slide. This is just the revenue potential under each option. I did not include the lodging tax. But for what we're collecting there. If we go from 2 to 6, it's like $700,000 worth of revenue. The difference between the ESGID mill levy and the CCFA combined mill levy is that the municipalities' contributions are included. And then you can see why we're talking about a sales tax. Thoughts on this slide? Just like as we think about how to combine these, right? Like I wouldn't suggest putting them on the ballot at the same time, but they can be combined over time. You know, it's a total thing, 6 years. These are some of the considerations that I think we have to have in our mind as we think about how to sequence them. Any thoughts on this? Standard questions. Saying what do you agree with? What's wrong?
What are the upper limits on these taxes legally?
On public service tax, public safety tax rather, or it's public safety is a 2% tax max
For state law,
per state law.
year after year after year.
Yes, each year, much like, no, it's each year is 2%. It's the most you can collect each year.
Right.
Wow.
As in, you can't go 2 and then 4.
No, it's not, just can't add on each year.
Okay, so wait a minute. We are capped at 2%, so we can't do anything we've just discussed?
No, so.
Or we can only raise it by 2% each year.
So public safety tax, even though it's a sales tax, is considered a different tax entirely. So it's separate from our calculations on sales tax and other taxes. It's a unique tax and it is up to 2% a year. Not to muddy the waters, but for example, lodging tax is up to 2% a year, separate from our sales tax. So it's the same type of tax.
It's the a year.
Yes.
Right, so it's not, you can't add on to it, I think is what you're
It's a
saying,
forever.
It is capped
I'm
at
just-
2%
every year.
period.
So
Okay,
I'm
okay.
present.
2% on top of the
It's
sales
just-
tax.
Okay.
If I'm looking at this correctly, you're looking at the ESGID mill proposal, which really benefits the fire department initially. And we wouldn't see increased revenue for the sheriff's office for 2 to 3 years, or I got that wrong.
Let's go to the next slide. This is, I think, I will call this my proposal. I've done my best to talk to people and make sure I'm not too off base here, but I will own this proposal. So that if y'all want to beat anybody up for making this proposal, it's me. I think that it's, when I look at the survey data, I think ultimately, and when I look at the need, total need in the public safety system, 4.3. I don't think we meet all that need with either one of these options. And I think that ESGID mill proposal is the option that's more ready this year. And so, yes, to answer your question, that does mean that as we work towards a countywide sales tax proposal that benefits the county general fund, the county's general fund and all the services inside of it, sheriff's office accredited, continue to be in a tough spot.
So George, in the beginning of this, getting to 9 mils was kind of what was talked about. I'm assuming that has changed and we're looking at probably needing more. That just does a sort of a
That's-
catch up.
That's a minimum to continue on as we are today with that. That's just.
Right.
And that'll only last until 33.
It's a glaring answer to that question.
It has to be
What's that?
additional increase or 3 above that.
So you would, in a real world, be wanting to look at more like 14.
We could do a lot with just under 12.
Because what I see with all these surveys is there's some pretty high respect or whatever for the fire authority. That kind of came across with both surveys.
And click EMS.
Right.
And the sheriff's office has come a long way.
Yeah, and I think something else realistically, when you look at surveying emergency services, fire departments and EMS tend to weight higher, I would believe, because they're not in as controversial a job as the police are.
Well,
We have-
I just pulled that on that. It's across the nation.
So it does say ESTID can fund the sheriff's office to a certain degree, but is that only with contract law enforcement or is that? So when you say it's fire department only, is that a self-imposed restriction or we have the option of opening this up to the sheriff's department funding?
We do, from a legal perspective, we have the option. When I look at the survey results, I don't think including the sheriff's office in a ballot measure is wise.
Would also then have to go above that 12.
Yeah. So, and then there's kind of the upper limits. So that, if we go back to looking at the bare minimum, at 1.09 million is the bare minimum of what fire authority thought it needed. Getting to 9 mils raised 788,000, right? So what it does is it gets the fire authority within range, right? It takes that solvency deadline pretty far out, right? And we're all still in a situation where we're needing to work to shore up the whole system. Every mill that we go above that is more valuable because then the municipalities are increasing their contributions. Municipalities right now are contributing at 9 mils. So, I mean, I'm curious. I don't want to like bury the lead, and I think the way I wrote this kind of does, and so I'm just going to say it here. One of the questions we have to deal with is with what's happening in the EMS fund being insolvent at the end of this year, does it make sense to include the EMS fund, EMS services in this for some number of mills above 9?
I think in the public eyes too, we're gonna be like, why did we just vote for the EMS to get what happened there? I mean, miscalculation or?
I think, I don't know, I wasn't here, but based on the number, what I saw was that they, I don't know if it was a miscalculation. I don't know if they understood how much the calls of service.
Right. That's exactly what it is.
It was not a miscalculation. It was like, if everything stayed the same in 2016 or 2017, this is what it would cost. And the problem is their call rates just keep going up and up, just like the fire department and everybody else, to the point where like needing the third crew.
But it's not just the I-72, like Jeremy was saying, we have an elderly community that people are falling down the stairs or so. I think this pushing this I-70 thing, me personally, we might want to tone it down a little bit because that's what the people are hearing and they don't want to pay for people to be hurt on I-70. They're sacrificing their own funds. So when Jeremy said that, I've just been thinking about that a lot in my head. And I think about all those people in Idaho Springs and Georgetown that are the elderly.
Yeah.
And we do need the services for them.
Median age is 50. That means
Right.
half the population is older than 50.
Wow.
Do you really think that after folks got their property tax bill, with all the goodwill with the fire department, that are gonna vote for a mill increase in November? I mean, one of my neighbors was hammering me about it this morning. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of,
losing
getting a lot of pushback on that too.
Good work, the fire department and the goodwill that they've.
Yeah, we're stuck
You get
like
it.
all the way.
It stinks.
I don't think there's an easy option here. I don't. Something to keep in mind is that within the fire authority protection district are 5 jurisdictions that can run separate ballot measures. Right? So Board of County Commissioners decides to put a ESGID mill increase. You don't have to talk about that with your constituents, right? But you have the option to. And so, I mean, do people feel like there's an option that's, I'll say, more viable than trying to run a mill based on fire? I have some other points I'd make about why I think it's the right option, but I don't want to just. And if you would leave that up.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted people to be able to see you guys talk.
George, I want you to know, I can't talk a lot about this, but the city is currently seeking advice, the occupational tax and business licensing fee. And also, I have to get council's permission, but with the EMS calls growing, I don't think it was ever the city of Idaho Springs' desire to have emergency services go in the hole because of a bike park. So I would just suggest that these are pretty civic-minded folks on council, and I believe they would like to make up whatever additional cost it is to EMS for the bike park. I think we would like to handle that very responsibly and at least absorb that portion of burden. Again, I think that'll be up to council, but I just think that it'll be very understood by them and supported.
Right? I mean, it's a system with the countywide sales tax, and we're, the system that exists for certain people in Idaho Springs. So it's not like every municipality.
Right.
So that's what you mean by there are 5 different districts under?
Yeah, because the 4 municipalities
Oh, plus unincorporated.
plus the unincorporated. The other thing that I think when you're talking about fire departments and property taxes is that fire departments protect property to a greater extent than the other services. Obviously, sheriff's offices protect property as well. But the property itself. So I think that's an important thing. I think that's why you tend to see fire departments do better on property tax measures. The other thing is that to this tourism volume question, it's the fire department most who, tell me if I'm speaking out of line here. It's the fire department most who we design our systems to make sure that we're there for a fire. And that's the most expensive thing to design for, right? Designing for helping clear accidents and helping with EMS. Those are things we do because we have the time when we're not on calls. But we're designing a system to make sure that we can show up fast enough with enough people to put your house out, right? And so that's the most also resistant to the idea that we need to figure out a way to help the state pay for the tourism impact, right? We will need a fire department that costs this much to protect your home, whether they're tourists on the highway or not.
And does that include protecting your home from wildfire?
No, that's structure fire too. I think that's where we have this misconception. And Andy can talk to us probably more than I can too. We build a system that essentially, if your house is on fire, and I'll use Georgetown, for example, because Georgetown gives me nightmares. Because we built these historic homes and you can almost touch house to house. Idaho Springs has the same problem, but Georgetown's unique because it's got a wind alignment problem. So we built an organization around, we want to keep a single fire within this original house of origin, right? That's what the Marshall Fire was. It wasn't a wildfire issue. It was started by wildfire, but it was home to home condition. Let's be honest.
Right.
It was a well-built neighborhood with the right fences in the right places and the right sheds, and it went house to house. So we want to avoid that. We have national historic districts we want to protect. So we've always tried to staff at a level that we keep those fires to that original level. And the system currently is. And the drawback to that is there's an inherent cost with that. And fire departments are incredibly expensive because you're always staffing for that. The worst case scenario, we need 7 people, even though most of the time we need 2. So the highway, while it's, the reason the highway is such a pain in people's daily lives is they see the impacts, right? We have an accident on the highway, it slows them down and they're pissed because it took them 12 extra minutes to get to St. Mary's. Right, prior to the bridge, it was like 40 extra minutes to get down. So they remember that. Damn tourists, highways. That's not our call load, and that's not what we build our system around. We build our system around the 68% of our call load as a medical component, our aging community, and fires, whether it's wildfire or structure fire in general. We built the entire system around to protect that, and we also have, so now on top of that, we have an aging community underfoot. Right? 1890 was a great year. We built a lot of homes in 1890. Well, now as they get older and older, and we change how we live, or new furnishings in these whole homes, we've also inherently increased our risk, which also, your couch is like a 5-gallon pill of gasoline in the living room, but you went home, you went and bought it right home. So all of this has changed, especially in the last 20 years. So we've had to build a system around it. Our staffing and our training and the trucks that we run, and all of that has had to increase accordingly. Why it's expensive. And I think when we get in this conversation about mills, we haven't asked the taxpayer in this community for a mill besides Silver Plume since the ballot in November of '88. I think we need to kind of tell people that, like, really, really fortunate as a community to not pay more to the ESGID since November of '88, starting in January of '89. That's a long run, longer than probably anywhere else we did research. It's hard to find another area that had that same run without a tax increase, if they need to be. Right, yeah. Really tough. So that's where we get into this conversation of why we need money. And yeah, lowering volunteers is directly the same people that say we have less money now, we work more overtime. That's why we have less volunteers. It's the same, it all correlates. And less free time, so I think it's all. Might get something too interesting for numbers is for highway insurance. We're only, if you look at it, and I don't have a detail, this is just kind of a ballpark figure. We're only putting about $80,000 out of our budget towards responding on the highway.
Wow. Okay.
Bulk of our money that we need and that we are using to provide fire protection, even though we don't have many fires.
Okay. So when we are concerned about the highway, is it more sheriff resources that are being taxed because of I-70?
About 17% of our calls for service are involve the highway. But that also means a significant percentage, much larger, does not involve the highway.
Right.
But, you know, crashes can be very disruptive, probably to the local communities as well. When people can't get into the, you know, Georgetown or Idaho Springs and such, it's delaying them as
Get
well.
home. Yeah.
We'd be hard pressed to say we're simply not going to respond anymore because we have an obligation to provide public safety to everyone.
Sure.
And, you know, let's be honest about it, the I-70 is a huge corridor from the metropolitan area to the ski areas. And, you know, people are going to use it. That's where most of them are going to come from. But they're also probably the same people that come in here and spend money. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I totally get it. But we have to respond. If we didn't, can you imagine that headline?
I don't want to live, I don't want to, like, what happens when you live in Clear Creek County and there's an accident that just doesn't get cleared? I don't think that ends very well for any of us. Right? So I want to ask.
Clarify those numbers I just put out. That would include going on calls to assist the ambulance. So that's all.
That 4% includes the ambulance.
Yeah, that's for responding on calls. Just help them.
Okay.
The I-70 situation, it's not so much the direct cost, it's the rate of response. We respond to 5 times the amount of accidents as a proportion of our call load as Jeff Com's other customers do.
Oh, cool.
Right? About 5% of the calls for service in the metro are vehicle accidents, 25% vehicle accidents here, right? And so it's not really about the directed cost, it's the proportionality, right? It's the other issue is it's very acutely felt when EMS has to transport.
Right.
Again, the 2 ambulance situation, now you got 1 ambulance, right? And so it's the opportunity. cost or the
Bless you.
direct cost. Is that a 20% doesn't sound like a large number, but from an opportunity cost perspective, it is a big number. It means 1 out of 5 calls is now taking resources away from other things, right? So it's not around the directed cost. It's really around the opportunity cost of now that can't do something else, right? And it's comparing ourselves to counties that are less funneled through one freeway.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is the important story, right? Is
Right.
that, and for us, like CDOT closes 70, but who knows, we close the county, right? Like who else is in that situation? One road closes and we're close, right? And that's kind of, yeah. That's
Okay, so I want to give, Bill, I want to ask you at this point what your thoughts are about this. And then if I want to ask for like any objections, and then we can move forward to talk about next steps, how we can get this done with the last less than half hour. If this is what you're doing. Bill, what do you think?
Well, I think it's important if you're gonna consider a property tax, a mill levy increase, and we haven't had one since 1988.
For the,
For the
at all, or just for the fire?
fire. That I do, and since for the previous fire survey, we gave options. We didn't have ballot language. I do think it's important that people see this and we get their reaction to it. So I do think another survey would be advisable, but we've surveyed people a lot. So, we could have some survey fatigue out there. I don't think we do another mailer with a QR code. If we're going to do it, I do think it probably should be like a telephone-based survey where folks get a random sample call and take a short survey over the phone. Some of those will be done over text, but we would also ensure if we did that we also got those correct proportions of men, women, age groups, zip codes. We could even make sure we're knowing who's in the unincorporated versus Idaho Springs, stuff like that. Because then we might be able to truly look and see what are different demographics opinions of the mill levy proposal. So that's, if you proceed to have some confidence about how the public might perceive a property tax, that would be my recommendation. Couple other things I'm thinking about. I always start with data and who's likely to vote. And so I did have, is it all right if I share one more time?
Yeah.
I'm going to share it one more time. This is at the very end of the slide packet, but I'm going to put it up here. And mind you, this is countywide, but I did a quick look and it's very similar for just the Clear Creek Fire Authority service. And I can do that analysis separate on voter turnout. So these are real numbers. So your November 2023 voter turnout, you can see here, you had a 45.5% voter turnout in 2023, the last odd numbered year election. 30.59% of those voting were Democrats, 43% were unaffiliated. I'm not as focused on party. I focus on things like age, because age often is the best determination on kind of tax sensitivity because of folks on fixed income. So you can see here in an odd numbered year election, right? You have almost 50% of your voters are 65 and older. Whereas during an even numbered year, when candidates get involved, partisan candidates, it gets younger because there's efforts to get younger people to vote, stuff like that. But then you have to balance that with, are older voters more inclined to support a public safety measure, something involving EMS, something involving fire? So but I'm just saying that, these are the numbers that I see from real voter data. And then I think you all as officials representing your community kind of have to balance that. Do you think the older members of the community could potentially support a mill levy for fire service, EMS, because those are services, public services that those voters recognize as being very important to themselves? So that's kind of what I think is important as part of informing the conversation that you all are having.
I want to circle back on one thing that was mentioned before, which is like, we talked about a little bit about the legal limit of taxation. The reason why the sales tax, well, is you're hit the political limit, like the economic limit, right? Passing over to be number one is a lot different than a property tax rate, which is less than mid.
Okay.
Right? So that's where I am, is I'm worried about that threshold. I'm worried about our economic development plans if we start passing that threshold, because then you stand out, you're on your own, people will focus on that, right? Whereas again, we're less than mid. So there's more room there before people are really paying attention. The other thing is sales tax is crazy volatile. It can be gamed, especially in a community this small. So if that sales tax rate gets too high, we're all going to Walmart and Jeffco.
Right.
Right? Like, you can game sales tax. You can live your entire life in this county and not pay $1 in sales tax. Right? So do not give people more reason to not engage economically with us. And I think the sales tax rate reaches a point where that becomes a reality, right? And then it also makes a real business viability issue, especially with the Safeway, which I won't stop on. But I think that's a limit that needs to be discussed here, is that there is, like, we're at the top of one, down here on the other, right?
Okay. That's a great argument. I appreciate that.
So Jenny, and then we're just going to go around the room. I just want to ask everybody sort of whether they think they can live with this, whether there's an alternative path they'd like to take.
I just wanted to put something on the record because it's been brought up many times about the negativity towards the sheriff's office in the survey. And a lot of the people in the room have not actually seen the 200 comments. So I went through and did a quick little stats. So of the 200 comments, the sheriff's office is mentioned 28 times. But some of those are multiple times in one comment. And so there are 10 truly negative comments that say, I will not vote for a tax increase if the sheriff's office is included. There's 5 additional that may lean that way as well, which brings it up to 15. But we're looking at, like 5 to 7.5% of the people that commented. And I think, to Isaac's point, if you survey any jurisdiction, of any significant size, you'll find the same sort of response from people towards law enforcement. And I don't think Clear Creek County is, at least at this point, that out of the norm for where the sheriff's office, the sentiment towards the sheriff's office anyway. That's all.
Good clarification.
One little comment, just to stir the pot a little bit. What is it you would need to see from the sheriff's office in order to feel comfortable with proposing some sort of a sales tax or a mill levy increase? Because if there isn't additional money coming in, we would have to try to provide the same services based on our current budget. And some things we can't control. We need to make quality contacts with people. We need to deliver a quality service, but the costs to the business aren't getting any lower for us either. So we're like, are we in a catch-22 situation where we're being asked to do something that really does require some infusion of money in order to improve, in order to get the attention to justify increased money.
I mean, I think the really important thing is that I don't think we're talking about increased money. I don't think that's what we're talking about. I think we're talking about trying to sustain our services, and I think that's really important. And I think maybe that's part of how the survey got sideways, because the survey said we're talking about more deputies, right? And so like that, if you're looking for an example of where I think we need to see improvement, I think that there's one. Jody?
I just have a couple of things, to your point, what we're asking for is not even getting us to, as you said, to the Cadillac status.
Right.
Which is sad when I look at other people's, tax rates, if we're going the retail tax. That would just give us basic services and we would be taxing the crap out of people. The other thing too is I think as an elected official, when I sit here with all these people, I think it's my job to get the word out what all these services are. Like the fire does help with the fire mitigation. They give firewood to the elderly. When I heard about this stuff, I had no idea. I think it's more than the services that these people think they're getting. Just because they're not making those calls, and same with EMS. So I would just ask, and I don't know if it would be the three departments, if I could get a list of different things, EMS has the whole blood, they do CPR, they do the blood drives. The fire department does their things. I know the sheriff's department has relationships with the schools, just those little things that I think we can talk about when we're at town halls and
Giving points, basically.
yeah, so people can see this engaging, because I do think there's probably 5 people on Facebook that just light fires all around. And that's also what is going, and the sheriff's department too, you'll see them fighting. There's a very strong support system in the sheriff's department too. The community is split right now. And unfortunately, it's going to take a long time to heal. So I just think that's my job. So
can we've got 15 minutes. The Board of County Commissioners is gonna have to move forward with a survey between this meeting and our next meeting. And so I want your feedback. And so we want your feedback. So I'm curious to hear, I have 2 questions, if we can just go around the room to our municipal partners, and Sheriff's Office, also happy to hear from you. I know you're on the county team as well. And the fire authority. We're just gonna go around the room. 2 questions. Do you think that ESGID based property tax increase is the way to go? And how do you feel about including EMS?
And where was the last one?
And how do you feel about including Quaker EMS?
Thank you.
And because Jeremy, you're immediately to my right.
I think it's our only chance. And he's right. If our property taxes are really low, and I think there's a misconception. And I think making the transition to include EMS, I have no issue with it. That was certainly.
I agree 100%. And I think this is going to be a heavy lift no matter how we go, just because people are very stirred up like a hornet's nest. And I get folks stop me in the grocery store and they're really angry about the property tax valuations. And I try to tell them, look, just because a valuation says 20% doesn't mean that your taxes are going to go up 20%. But they trust government like as far as they can throw them, it's going to be a heavy lift. And I think that mentioning the sheriff's department in whatever form we take here is going to make it more difficult. That's the only thing. I do think that EMS should be included. I think most people feel pretty comfortable with fire department and EMS. And George, I think to your point about 3 years ago, the sheriff's department would have pulled very low. That also is true of Idaho Springs. The public opinion was so low you couldn't even see it, particularly after the elderly gentleman in the tasing incident. I personally had death threats from that. I mean, boy, it would have been hard to have got a penny passed or anything for our local sheriff's department. Our local chief would have just been pulling his hair out. So anyways.
Georgia?
First of all, I think that the property tax is preferred over the sales tax from what I'm hearing. It sounds like we're at the cap, and that would be one heck of a number one status to have. I do think including EMS is really important. I agree with what Chuck was saying, that it will be a heavy lift. It will be. There's no doubt about it. People in Georgetown feel that their property taxes are already very high. They're not compared to other counties, but we know that that's not the best argument. I think that this is really going to be about so much education, and we get it here, but I don't know that Georgetown people get it or constituents get it, because this is very refined and we're in an incredible atmosphere with a lot of the subject matter experts here. So I think it would be our job, and I'm looking at Rich for this, but also me, to make sure that in Georgetown, we really condense this into something where people understand. Fire hasn't had a mill levy increase since 1988. That's super amazing.
Yeah.
That length of time has happened. And to Jody's point, what else is being offered? Here's the basket of services that each of these three legs offers. So to me, it's a question of, yeah, it should happen. Absolutely should include EMS. And we all have a big job to do to make sure that everybody understands the depth of the need and the breadth of what's offered and what will be lost if we don't do it. That's really an incredible part of this message too.
Thank you. Jeanette?
To make sure I understand this ESG ID, so you're raising the mills to the unincorporated.
Correct.
So if I'm talking to someone in Empire, their property tax would not go up based on this unless Empire also raises their property tax. We pay 9 mills, but our mills are only at 4.5. We make up the rest with sales tax. Empire was probably the worst on absolutely no, I would not vote for this. I'm noticing our numbers are a little bit higher. We're also a small number of people, but they're going to see this and think that their property tax is going up inside the town of Empire. It's not, unless Empire puts that out also, which we have not gotten far enough into discussions, but we know that's something we might have to do if we can't make up those numbers in sales tax. That's up to us. So the education piece is huge, they all said, no, it wouldn't affect them. This truly would not affect them. It's not hitting their property tax. I don't think they realize that when they're doing the surveys. Well, this particular question maybe wasn't asked this way.
That way.
Yeah.
Right.
But I recognize they're going to react to property tax, and this would not hit them. That's an important thing for the municipalities to know, that this is just for unincorporated Clear Creek County.
GID, only unincorporated voters would get on their ballot too. So no municipal voters would actually see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I want to just proceed with us kind of, I know we're almost out of time. Pull those slides back up. Some things that we're going to need to hear from in addition to this. As we survey,
yeah,
we can either survey only the fire authority area, or we can survey in the municipalities in the way that you all do end up with information about the viability of your own tax measures. Would you like to be included in a survey so that you get information about the viability of your tax measures or not?
I personally think it'd be a really good idea if Idaho Springs was.
Does that complicate surveys?
Might have to, if we're going to ask a ballot question, we're going to have to ask it in a way that it's not unincorporated specific. So we could get a sense of someone in Idaho Springs, how they would respond to
Because I think we need the unincorporated answer, right?
we need the unincorporated.
So does adding the other communities then, how does that complicate people filling out that survey is my question.
One of the ways to make sure it doesn't And I think this is like, this is a please, we don't get to tell you what to do, but this is a please. If you're on the ballot, please don't ask for, please ask for the same number of mills that we are, right? If Idaho Springs is asking for 9 and we're asking for 4.5, I don't think we help each other.
Exactly.
So that's one thing.
Agreed.
I want to point out to you all that if ESGID goes up to 10, the IGA says so to you. And so I want to hear, maybe just sit with that for a minute. Because we don't have time to discuss it today, but we'll do some one-on-one conversations. I want you all to be aware of that.
So I've got a question how that works. So like one of my questions was, I agree with Georgia on everything, but we're already making up to 9 mills with sales tax. So how do I answer folks when if it is on Georgetown ballot to go up to 9 and they say, well, you guys are already making that up already, why should I vote for it? And if it goes up to 10, then does that mean like each municipality has to, like, does Empire and Georgetown go on the ballot for 1 year? Or how does that work?
What I hope is that if we decide we're going up 4.5 mills to get to 9, then if you're thinking about getting on the ballot as well for a property tax increase, that's your ask as well. And if we end up deciding we want to try to get to 10 for fire, then you're asking for 5.5 mills if you're on the ballot. Either we would want to hear from you that, yes, I can increase the mill and, and like the IGA will stay solid, or we're going to ask for that 5.5, right? And these are like, all the best I can do right now is introduce the complexity and then reach back out. And that's so like, if you all, we often end meetings like this, have some conversations with your bodies, get back to us. I think that's kind of the extent of it. I think the ask from the county is to help us get where we need to be with the SGID. Maybe not considering things that aren't property tax this year. And if you are considering a property tax, like same language, same level,
Is it beneficial to like the library, when they went around with their campaign, they said, this is the equivalence to buying 1 pizza dinner. Putting that in what 1 meal is going to be for people, so they could just have something in their mind, like, well, I could sacrifice 6 dinners a year or whatever it is to get better services.
100%.
Yeah.
And
People don't know what it
your question about phone calls. People don't answer the phone and respond to telephone solicitation calls. I don't think that would be helpful.
Works real well. Actually, I've been doing statistical phone-based surveys all around the state of Colorado this spring for other municipal, county, and school district clients. And we've got about between a 55 and 70% response rate.
That's amazing.
Got to be.
That is amazing.
Because with the mail out was about 9.5%.
Yeah, well, we're doing a random sample based on the demographics of the election year we're targeting, and it's a statistical survey. So we have quotas that we're hitting and stuff like that. So we try and balance between live live calls, most on mobiles, because people have transitioned to mobiles. And then we also bring in text, what we call text to web, where someone's invited to take the survey. We ensure that they are who we think they are based on the voter file. And then their response is accepted into the sample.
Yeah, because, okay.
Quick rundown of our timeline here. If you think you might participate in the election, you have until July 1st to notify the clerk of your intent to participate. In July, we're going to determine the mill rate to ask for. We're going to be developing language, surveying that language, doing community presentations, all that stuff. Like, we've got our work in front of us. August, responding to survey information. This is something for this survey too that we're going to want to put together as like an FAQ in response to all everything in there. end of August, really September 1st is when we have to have something on the ballot. And so until then, we'll be considering it. We'll be providing information to the public. And then we'll make a final decision in that last meeting in August. The board will. So that's the timeline. And I'm just gonna just a quick closing comment. And you can pull down this presentation. I opened this slide with our shared goal, right? Which is a strong public safety system, right? We've got whether you need your life to be saved, whether your house is on fire, or whether somebody just broke into your home. Like when you call 911, you want a quick response by people that are well trained and in sufficient numbers to solve your problem, right? And I don't think anybody here, I haven't heard anybody here say our goal isn't that all three of these services have the funding they need. About how we do it, because it's really, really complicated in Colorado. Actually, in 1988, it was just the Board of County Commissioners that decided that it was worth taxing people to fire. You found that was before favor. So I hope we're all in this for the long haul. I hope we can have some success here, because if we're all motivated towards success here, a little bit more of the problem is out of the way. Any other final comments before we close the meeting?
Real quick, including two of the three for funding. This does not equate public safety. So I think that's important. Recognize, I mean, public safety is as a whole, like you just described.
Yeah.
So when we're excluding one, we're not focusing on public safety.
The Board of County Commissioners is going to continue to have your backs in the meantime with our general fund that you're on, that has a $15 million reserve. I think that's it.
Do we think about next date?
Do we have a next meeting date on the calendar?
No.
Ooh, that's not it. The funnest part of this. Oh, thank you so much.
So if we have a July 1st deadline, we better meet before then, right? Oh, it's just notifying her, not the language yet.
We're gonna have the Board of County Commissioners, we're gonna have to start to make decisions about the commissioner. I was actually thinking the latter part of July. It's a little bit of chance to try to get a survey drafted and out there. I know we're not gonna be dropping a survey during 4th of July week. No.
So is the survey going to be part of the public education campaign for this ballot measure?
I think surveys have that effect, even though it's not intended.
Well, it tells us the feasibility.
And that,
It tells us what groups, demographic groups respond to what messages, because we'll test language and reasons for the ballot question, right? Needing to address paid firefighters and the volunteer system, needing, I took some notes here during this to refine messages, and it'll tell us kind of what do people respond to, what reasons for this ballot question are most important, impactful for folks. That helps us fine tune our education pieces and our community outreach efforts. So yes,
so
say so.
yes, and then the education piece would be done once the ballot, that would start in September. I mean, you got the presentations, you've got the surveying going on, but then isn't there also going to need to be a concerted effort to get the word out?
Once it's on the ballot,
Right.
that is no longer a conversation that governments are involved in.
Understood. But I just think we need to think about that.
But until that point, governments can educate and outreach on
Correct.
the road measure. We did a couple quick online town hall kind of things. Yeah.
We need to get to talking dates.
I just want to bring up, board legalization is between July 15th and August 5th, and we might have to ask you for some special meeting dates. As Rich brought up today with the property cards going out, I've talked to the assessor. We're expecting quite a few protests. So just between the 15th and August 5th. Heads up. We might have some additional meetings on the BOCC side.
We'll just have to schedule it around whatever date we schedule here.
Yeah.
I mean, we could push to the 6th. Do we want to talk in July? I'll leave that to the municipalities. Do we want to talk in July?
I'm all for it.
I think if we're running a ballot measure, I don't.
Yeah.
Got to.
Agreed.
I mean, it's gotta be pedal to the metal.
So July 21st, July 22nd.
July 21st is some kind of a training for elected officials.
Yes, we set the EOC training that day. Should be on your calendar. Better be.
It's not on mine.
I don't
Be
see
in
it.
about
There's nothing
5
on
minutes.
All right, well, we'll be this afternoon. With that whole morning is booked with our leadership team to do an EOC training.
Or
8 to 12,
Thank you.
8 to 12, so what about it in the afternoon?
Oh, I'm sorry, what was?
Afternoon of the 21st.
I didn't realize it.
Yeah,
Idaho Springs is good.
Monday.
Georgia? Rich?
Monday afternoon would work.
Hire 30 people? 1 o'clock? Sheriff's office?
So what time?
1 o'clock on the 22nd.
What time was it?
We're talking 1 o'clock on the 21st.
1 o'clock, okay.
That gives us a reasonable shot to get a survey out.
Mhm.
And with results.
Mhm.
And be here, same here.
Same time, same place? Same place. Gotta get these cliches out of my head. Okay,
I'd have to zoom in.
that's fine. Unless, do you have an alternative you want?
Oh,
Okay.
well, that's a good
Bill will be here on Zoom.
time.
We'll be here in digits. Okay, well, we're adjourned.